Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're taking a completely objective look at the anatomy of a highly polarized piece of political commentary. We're going to break down a recent release from NERC News. Now, to be clear, our goal today isn't to validate or debunk any of the claims being made. Instead, we're popping the hood. We want to see exactly how this creator constructs their argument, mapping out the architecture piece by piece. Because, understanding these mechanics, that is absolutely crucial. It's what separates a passive media consumer from an active, critical thinker. So let's dive right in. Every strong piece of commentary needs a spark, right? An inciting incident to get the fire going. And for this source, that spark is a really striking CNN exchange. Representative Seth Moulton was asked point blank if he believed the Secretary of Defense nominee was guilty of war crimes. And his response was a simple, absolutely. Now, the commentator doesn't just treat this as a passing remark. No, they use this highly controversial quote as the entire foundation for their video, framing it as this major slip of the mask that reveals a much deeper, systemic issue within both the media and the political establishment. To make sense of this architecture, we're going to methodically unpack four main structural pillars today. 1. A controversial comment. 2. The proposed media pattern. 3. Establishment versus the outsiders. And 4. The cycle of escalation. All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, a controversial comment, or the inciting incident on CNN. The source immediately draws a stark contrast between two opposing forces in that CNN segment. On one side, you have Representative Moulton literally comparing the Pentagon nominee Pete Hegseth to Nazi submarine captains facing execution during World War II. I mean, that is an incredibly intense historical analogy. But then, pushing back against this is conservative commentator Scott Jennings. The video zeroes in on Jennings vigorously defending Hegseth, arguing that his 2-month mission yielded incredible battlefield successes and strongly rejecting the use of the word quagmire. Essentially, the creator uses Jennings as a proxy for you, the audience, someone cutting through what they call deranged allegations to defend a successful military operation. Moving right along to Section 2, the proposed media pattern, focusing on laundering extreme rhetoric. This part brilliantly illustrates the core mechanic of their argument. The creator claims there's this predictable 3-step playbook used by establishment media. Step 1, a political figure drops a really extreme statement. Step 2, the media reflexively steps in to, quote, sanitize the rhetoric in real time. They soften it up, kind of pretending the audience didn't just hear what they clearly just heard. And finally, Step 3, the blame shift. The person who actually calls out that original extreme comment, like Scott Jennings did, well, they are subtly framed as the one causing the problem or breaking decorum. NERC News points to this Anderson Cooper and Scott Jennings exchange as they are absolute prime evidence that this laundering process is happening right in front of us. So why does the creator think all this extreme rhetoric is flying around in the first place? Well, they argue it's definitely not about oversight. No, it's about sheer political panic. And to back this up, they point to a massive, yawning gap in polling data. They note the Democrats are sitting way down at 28% trust when it comes to national security, while Trump's America First approach is soaring up at 58%. By highlighting this huge disparity, the commentator builds the case that aggressive rhetoric, like casually suggesting executions, is really just a symptom. It's the symptom of a political class waking up to the fact that they are vastly out of step with what the American public actually wants for national defense. Which brings us to Section 3, establishment versus the outsider, two different worlds. The source builds a really compelling narrative here of two fundamentally different worlds colliding. On one side, the establishment is painted as this group essentially managing decline from afar. They oversee these messy quagmires like Iraq and Afghanistan, leaning heavily on polished, consultant-approved scripts. But then, standing in stark contrast, is the ultimate outsider, Pete Hegseth. The narrative leans heavily into his background as an actual soldier who walked the trails, found redemption, and truly understands what military force is for. They position him as the face of successful operations and the kind of courage needed to confront real threats, like a nuclear Iran. So, according to this framework, the establishment isn't mad because of failure. They're enraged because an unmanaged, unpolished outsider is actually succeeding where they historically failed. And then the video draws this fascinating visual parallel to explain political behavior. They equate a polished politician calmly suggesting war crime tribunals on national television with a screaming protester demanding arrests while literally being dragged out of a room by security. The thesis here? These two people are doing the exact same thing. It's the same underlying argument, the same panic, just wearing different costumes. One gets to wear a suit, the other gets physically removed. But the video absolutely insists they are both downstream from the exact same political panic. basically a base losing its collective mind because someone they cannot control is suddenly in charge. That leads us right into our final pillar, Section 4, the cycle of escalation, retribution, and violence. To prove the CNN moment isn't just a one-off, the commentator lays out a broader, darker trend of retribution. They group together some pretty intense examples. Seth Moulton floating executions, late-night host Jimmy Kimmel making jokes about Trump's death, and billionaire Tom Steyer proposing we actually jail ICE agents for enforcing immigration laws. The underlying argument being made is that this is a premeditated choice by the left to cater to a, quote, bloodthirsty audience. And furthermore, they claim that by constantly programming the political base to view the incoming president as equivalent to Hitler, it's only natural that the base is going to demand ultimate retribution. The video wants us to see that this isn't just tough talk, it's the intentional injection of a really dark concept of retribution into the entire political ecosystem. And this all culminates in a pretty dire cause and effect sequence. The commentator claims that this sanitized moral outrage inevitably spills over into street-level violence. Here's how they map it out. Reckless statements get made, the media sanitizes them, which then empowers activists to act it out in the real world. Think threats, intimidation, vandalism. And the final step, feign shock. The establishment just pretends the escalation came completely out of nowhere. The overarching assertion here is that whenever the establishment loses control of a room, they default to this exact pattern of escalation, basically dressing up political violence as moral outrage. Which brings us to the end of our structural breakdown. After methodically linking a single CNN interview to national polling data, defining this massive clash between the establishment and outsiders, and mapping out a proposed cycle of media-sanitized violence, the source leaves its audience with this exact provocative question. Has the left become too comfortable with incendiary rhetoric and political violence? By framing it as a question, the video cleverly invites you to adopt the very framework we've just deconstructed. Recognizing these architectural patterns, that is exactly how you stay sharp in today's polarized media landscape. Thanks so much for learning with me today, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.